But now, special report is up next. Hey, Bret.
It is amazing. Thanks, Dana. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. We're following three major breaking stories right now. The president's pick for attorney general performs a balancing act before senators, showing support for the both Trump agenda and the special counsel probe. House Democrats turned down a free lunch with the president, refusing to negotiate over the partial government shutdown on a day the U.S. Coast Guard missed its first paycheck. But we begin tonight with a political crisis in Great Britain. British lawmakers have shot down Prime Minister Theresa May's plan on terms to leave the European Union, and they shot it down overwhelmingly. The so-called Brexit may be in jeopardy with just a matter of weeks until the UK is supposed to withdraw. And Prime Minister May's future at number 10 Downing Street also in doubt tonight. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has the latest tonight from London. Good evening, Greg.
Hi, Bret. Yeah, these numbers are astounding. Prime Minister May losing this Brexit vote in the Parliament building behind us by a whopping 230 votes. 118 members of her own Conservative Party mutinying, and the shockwaves are just beginning to be felt.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
A political earthquake in London. The House of Commons voting overwhelmingly against Prime Minister Theresa May's plan for Britain to exit the European Union, or Brexit. 432 members of Parliament voting against the deal, only 202 in favor. It's the biggest political defeat for a British government in modern history.
It is clear that the House does not support this deal, but tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how or even if it intends to honour the decision the British people took.
This deal was 2.5 years in the making. The British people had voted to leave the European Union, in their words, to take back control of the government. But negotiations with Brussels was difficult. May's Conservative Party was divided. The compromise divorce deal made few pro or anti-EU happy. Now, opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn is targeting May, calling for a vote of no confidence in the Conservative leader tomorrow.
I'm pleased that motion will be debated tomorrow, so this House can give its verdict on the sheer incompetence of this government.
While May's deal is hated, many here dislike the Labour leader more, so analysts expect her to survive. Still, the future of Brexit is in chaos. May will have to return to Parliament next Monday with a brand new plan. She had also said she'll go to Brussels looking for more concessions. There's a March 29 deadline. Experts say a no-deal crash out of the EU is now possible and would be chaotic. Some are calling for the deadline to be extended and perhaps a new referendum on the UK in the EU to be called.
Things are now much clearer about what Brexit actually means, and therefore it's entirely appropriate that people should be given another opportunity to say what they think.
President Trump has also said in the past that he is no fan of this Brexit deal. But the prospect of a no-deal Brexit has political and business leaders on both sides of the Atlantic hoping that a currently badly divided Britain will find some unity fast. Bret.
Greg Palcott live in London. Greg, thanks. More on this with the panel. Back here in this country, President Trump invited rank-and-file House Democrats to lunch today, essentially going over the head of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. But none of them showed up. It was the president's latest effort to get Democrats to the table to talk about the funding for a border barrier or wall and trying to find an end to the partial government shutdown. Here's Chief White House correspondent John Roberts on what happens now. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. What happens now is the president will continue to try to appeal to moderate Democrats on his calls for money for border security, including building a border barrier. But today, an effort to do that failed when two of the co-chairs of the Blue Dog Coalition and some other Democrats said to the president, "Thanks, but no thanks." President Trump invited a handful of Democrats to the White House today, along with an equal number of Republicans, to talk border security. None of the Democrats took him up on the offer.
I think it's pretty telling this was supposed to be a bipartisan lunch, and the sheer fact that not a single Democrat was able to show up is pretty telling as who wants to negotiate and who doesn't. The lunch reinforced the White House mantra that President Trump is willing to cut a deal, but Democrats only want to obstruct. On Capitol Hill, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer insisted
Brexit, he is willing to talk anytime, anywhere.
Well, I'll meet with him anytime he wants. As you know, the last time I spoke with him was when he walked out, threw a temper tantrum and walked out. So we haven't heard from him since then.
President Trump trolled the new House Speaker on Twitter today, writing, quote, "Why is Nancy Pelosi getting paid when people who are working are not?" Pelosi trolled him right back in a tweet saying, "Stop holding the paychecks of 800,000 Americans hostage. There is no reason for them to be suffering right now. Reopen the government. Hashtag Trump shutdown." Republicans again accuse Democrats of ignoring national security just to stick it to the president.
The question is, why have they all of a sudden flip-flopped on this issue? And the answer is pretty clear. It's because this is now an idea that comes from President Trump, and the Democrats clearly don't want to give the president a victory on this issue.
The lingering effect of the shutdown took on new significance today. The Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Carl Schultz, tweeting to his coasties, "Today you will not be receiving your regularly scheduled paycheck. To the best of my knowledge, this marks the first time in our nation's history that service members in a U.S. armed force have not been paid during a lapse in appropriations." With tax season approaching, the Treasury Department today announced it would call back more than half of the IRS's workforce later this month without pay to handle tax refunds, but that the agency may still not be able to fulfill some key functions. While all sides claim they want to end the shutdown, there is no movement toward compromise.
I'd like to see proposals going back and forth every day.
Democrats believe they can simply outwait President Trump as the shutdown begins to bite.
You're not winning the fight. You may be in your own untruth bubble, but you're not winning the fight. Everyone knows that. We certainly do.
President Trump continues, or plans at least to continue, to invite over moderate Democrats to the White House to try to talk to them about the need for border security. Tomorrow, he may have over members of the so-called Problem Solvers Caucus. We're not sure if that is going to happen. Asked today about the fact that Democrats shunned the president and did not take him up on his invitation, the House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said, quote, "My advice to members is that if the president invites you and wants to talk, you ought to go down to the White House." Brett?
I need some problem solvers. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Attorney General nominee William Barr is trying to walk the line between his allegiance to his prospective boss and independence from him. Barr began his confirmation hearing today before the Senate Judiciary Committee, expressing support for the special counsel Russia probe and disagreeing with the president about it being a witch hunt. And he steered his way through, at times, tough questioning like he had been there before, because he has. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge was at today's session, reports live from Capitol Hill and the hearing room. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett, and good evening. William Barr testified that he has known Robert Mueller for 3 decades and Mueller would not be involved in a witch hunt. Barr said the recusal of Attorney General Jeff Sessions was the right thing, and he committed to following the law and not bending to politics.
I will not be bullied into doing anything I think is wrong by anybody, whether it be editorial boards or Congress or the president.
From the outset, William Barr, the president's nominee to lead the Justice Department, said he will protect the special counsel investigation.
The country needs a credible resolution to these issues.
Barr said he saw no chance the probe will be shut down for cause, and he pledged to make the final Mueller report as public as possible.
I am going to try to get the information out there consistent with these regulations.
Are there any circumstances that would cause you to terminate the investigation?
Bob Mueller could only be terminated for good cause, and frankly, it's unimaginable to me that Bob would ever do anything that gave rise to good cause.
Other Democrats pressed Barr in a memo he wrote last year to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein that questioned whether the special counsel could bring an obstruction of justice case against the president for firing FBI Director James Comey.
If the president orders the Attorney General to halt a criminal investigation for personal reasons, would that be prohibited under your theory?
I think it would be a breach of the president's duties to faithfully execute the law. It would be an abuse of power.
Barr also revealed that the president reached out to him about possibly joining his legal team in June 2017, where the limited conversation also turned to the special counsel.
He was interested in that, wanted to know, what I thought about, Mueller's integrity, and I said, Bob is a straight shooter.
Barr served as Attorney General for Bush 41, and at 68, Barr suggested he was a strong candidate because he didn't need the job.
I'm in a position in life where I can do the right thing and not really care about the consequences.
On reports, the FBI opened an investigation into whether the president was directed by Russia to fire Comey in May 2017. Barr said the Bureau appeared to operate largely unchecked.
Are there rules about how you can do counterintelligence investigations?
I believe there are, Mr. Chairman.
So if you want to open up one against the president, are there any checks and balances?
Not outside the FBI.
On political bias at the FBI during the 2016 election, Barr called text messages between former agent Peter Strzok and former lawyer Lisa Page inappropriate.
I was shocked when I saw them.
Please get to the bottom of it. We're relying upon you to clean this place up.
And Barr pledged to investigate whether there was surveillance abuse during the 2016 campaign when a warrant was obtained and renewed multiple times using the anti-Trump dossier for Trump campaign aide. Bret.
Hearing continues now. Captain, thank you.
You're welcome.
It is shaping up to be a lonely ninth term for Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King. He's being ostracized by colleagues from both parties and has been formally rebuked and will not be allowed to serve on any committees. It's the latest backlash from comments last week, many interpreted as racially inflammatory, and several of his colleagues called outright racist. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel tells us where things stand tonight.
The punishment continues for Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King, with his colleagues voting 424-1 on a resolution of disapproval.
When elected representatives give cover and comfort to those who spread racial divisiveness, we embolden those on the fringes of our society.
King is in hot water for defending the terms white supremacy and white nationalism in a recent interview. On the House floor, King told his colleagues he agreed with the resolution of disapproval.
Let's vote for this resolution. I'm putting up a yes on the board here because what you state here is right, and it's true, and it's just.
A senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus was the only no vote, pushing instead for King to be censured.
Steve King has made a career out of being a racist, and right now Steve King needs to be censored.
But only 23 members of the House have ever been censured, the most recent New York Democrat Charles Rangel for ethics violations in 2010. Last night, House Republican leadership kicked King off his committee assignments for his latest controversial comments. Today, the House GOP leader stopped short of suggesting he should resign from Congress.
I think that's up to Steve King. The voters have elected him. The House Republicans denounce his language.
The third-ranking House Republican leader went further, saying it's time for King to go for his white nationalism comments.
We do not support it or agree with it, and as I said, I think he should find another line of work.
King responded to being stripped of his committee assignments, saying, quote, Leader McCarthy's decision to remove me from committees is a political decision that ignores the truth.
Pressure is clearly building on Steve King. The Des Moines Register editorial page is now calling on Steve King to resign. It says he has lost even the potential to effectively represent his Iowa constituents based on these latest controversial comments. Bret?
Mike, over on the Senate side, a bit of a back and forth between the majority and minority leaders over Russia sanctions today. What about that?
Well, that's right. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's been clearly frustrated by his counterpart, Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer, who has not wanted to vote on anything except reopening the government. Well, today, Schumer wanted to vote on something, a measure disapproving of lowering sanctions on Russian oligarchs. McConnell moved to set it aside. The Senate voted against McConnell 57-42. It then voted 57-42 to proceed. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was up here today arguing for lower sanctions. It did not work.
Brett.
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. Bill Barr's confirmation hearing ended just now. Stocks were up today, led by a big hike for Netflix stock after the company announced its largest rate increase ever. There are some experts on Wall Street who see the Brexit fail today as more reason for the world to invest in the safe haven of the U.S. market. You see the Dow gaining 156. The S&P 500 was up 28. The Nasdaq jumped 118 today. Despite the positive pop in the markets today, one of the most influential executives in the banking industry is painting a bleak picture of the U.S. economy the longer the partial shutdown continues. That is sparking some anxiety on Wall Street and Main Street for the long term. Susan Lee of the Fox Business Network joins us from New York. Good evening, Susan.
Good evening, Brett. It seems that when Jamie Dimon speaks, the investment world listens. The head of America's biggest bank at J.P. Morgan, on an earnings call with reporters this morning, said someone estimated that if it goes on for the whole quarter, it could reduce growth to zero. We just have to deal with that, and it is more of a political issue than anything else. Now, there aren't many forecasts for zero growth in the first 3 months of this year, but when Jamie Dimon talks, people listen. But economists have been reducing the predictions, though, because of the partial government shutdown. The White House even doubling its initial figures, now saying the U.S. economy will be impacted by 0.1% every week. Ratings agency Moody's and investment bank J.P. Morgan also forecasting a reduction in the economy from the D.C. standoff, with likely lower consumer confidence and spending being impacted. Some sectors of the economy are already taking a hit.
We're seeing a reduction in revenues in the month of January. Not huge, but about $25 million due to the fact that government contractors and some government officials are not traveling.
2019 is also supposed to be the biggest year for tech IPOs since 2000, with familiar names like Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb expected to go public. But with the Securities and Exchange Commission closed, applications are not being approved. And the longest jobs expansion on record, standing at 99 months, is under threat if furloughed workers are dropped off the payrolls. Brett?
Susan, thank you. 3 names are surfacing as front runners to the new World Bank, to be the new head of the World Bank. Chief of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, or OPIC, Ray Washburn, on that list of possible replacements for outgoing President Jim Yong Kim. The others are Treasury Department Undersecretary for International Affairs David Malpass and PepsiCo CEO Indra Nooyi. Up next, another major legal defeat for President Trump. A former secretary to accused drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman says his boss paid tens of millions of dollars to then Mexican President Peña Nieto. Alex Cifuentes said he could not remember the total amount, but he reportedly put the figure at $250 million earlier. Guzman is on trial in New York for international drug trafficking and conspiracy to murder his rivals. No word from the now former Mexican president. The highest court in Massachusetts says people can be arrested on drugged driving charges based solely on a police officer's observations. The court says since there is no roadside test to determine if someone is driving under the influence of marijuana, officers must use their best judgment. Recreational marijuana is legal in Massachusetts. The Democratic National Committee no longer appears on a list of Women's March 2019 sponsors. Dozens of sponsors have dropped their support of this year's event since March co-president Tamika Mallory over the weekend declined to condemn anti-Semitic religious leader Louis Farrakhan. The committee was on the list as of Sunday. The DNC is refusing to comment tonight. Meanwhile, multiple reports say new freshman Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib appeared with a known anti-Semite at a party here in Washington last week. For the second night in a row, a major defeat for the Trump agenda at the hands of the courts. Yesterday was the Obamacare contraceptive mandate. Tonight, the effort to put a citizenship question on the 2020 census. Correspondent David Lee Miller tells us why, as of now, it will not happen.
In a legal setback for the Trump administration, a federal judge says the 2020 census cannot ask people if they are U.S. citizens. A coalition of 18 states, along with other parties, filed a lawsuit challenging the Commerce Department's plan to ask the citizenship question. The Commerce Department oversees the census. U.S. District Judge Jesse Furman, an Obama appointee, ruled that non-citizen and Hispanic households would be reluctant to take part in a census with a citizenship question. The judge found that, quote, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people will go uncounted. According to the judge, quote, that undercount in turn will translate into a loss of political power and funds, among other harms for various plaintiffs, since its data is used to determine federal aid and congressional representation. Some immigrant rights advocates accuse the Trump administration of trying to weaponize the census.
It seems like a key motivation here is to mangle the census, to drive the numbers down, to render them inaccurate.
Supporters of the government's position argue that a citizenship question has been asked in previous years. The last time was 1950, and that its inclusion helps protect minorities under the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
To the average American, this means one less question on your census, and that means that there will be less precise information about how many citizens reside in specific areas.
Well, the decision found that the Commerce Department violated a federal law prohibiting government agencies from acting in an arbitrary or capricious manner. The ruling also said the citizenship question was not a pretext for discrimination. Legal analysts say the government is likely to appeal. Brett?
David Lee Miller, thank you. Up next, another migrant caravan leaves Central America bound for the U.S. First, beyond our borders tonight, the terrorist group Al-Shabaab is claiming responsibility for an attack on a luxury hotel in Kenya's capital. No word yet on casualties. It comes a day after a magistrate's court ruled 3 men must stand trial on charges they were involved in a deadly attack on a Nairobi shopping mall in 2013. And Iran has conducted one of at least 2 satellite launches it plans, despite criticism from the U.S. But the satellite failed to reach orbit. The U.S. says the effort defies a United Nations Security Council resolution. Iran is denying that. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. 2,000 Central American migrants are on their way to the U.S. right now. They're part of the latest caravan intent on reaching and crossing the southern border. Correspondent Steve Harrigan has the story tonight from Honduras.
3 months after a caravan of 7,000 Central American migrants reached the U.S. border, another one has begun, with a third one scheduled in just a few days. The route goes from Honduras to Guatemala into Mexico. The goal, almost all say, is entry into the U.S. to find work. Their hope is that the caravan will be too big to stop.
It can be dangerous if one goes on their own. You can be kidnapped or killed, and one doesn't know what's going to happen in Mexico on their own.
Basic questions about the caravan remain murky. A flyer on Facebook set the departure date, but it is not clear who will feed, clothe, and transport a crowd that could grow to 10 or 15,000 over the next 3 weeks. Activists say the caravan relies on charity.
Go with the people in the caravan and walk with them and sleep with them, and you will see there is no financing. What there is a lot of solidarity.
This is the first leg of the journey, 150 miles to the Guatemalan border. A lot of the women and children that we saw earlier this morning boarded buses to the Guatemalan border. A bus ticket costs about $7, but for many of these young men setting off on a 3,000-mile journey, they don't have $7 for a bus ticket. Despite promises by Mexico's new President Lopez Obrador for humane treatment for the migrants, they may be wearing out their welcome. The city of Tijuana has decided to close down its largest shelter, which at one point housed thousands of migrants from the last caravan, just as another, possibly larger one, appears set to arrive. In Entrada, Honduras, Steve Harrigan, Fox News.
There are concerns tonight among U.S. officials and European allies about whether President Trump might withdraw the country from NATO, the 70-year-old alliance of 29 nations whose original purpose was to counter the Soviet Union. The New York Times reports the president keeps bringing up to his advisors to pull out of NATO, and they keep shooting it down. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has details tonight from the Pentagon.
At the NATO summit last July, just 4 days before President Trump met one-on-one with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, the president threatened to pull the United States out of NATO, according to 2 former U.S. officials present in Brussels. He was deadly serious and continues to question why the U.S. is in the alliance. The president's warning sent shockwaves through the summit, alarming allies and his national security advisors. Former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was not on stage for the president's final press conference. In his resignation letter, he cited the importance of treating allies with respect.
It's an unfair burden on the United States.
At a breakfast meeting where President Trump chastised the NATO Secretary General, Chief of Staff John Kelly could be seen looking uncomfortable. President Trump proceeded to tell Germany it was not paying enough and arrived 45 minutes late for the plenary session, where he said, "I'm done, we're pulling out."
I think that act would be so destructive to our country. It would be a ground for some profound effort by our part, whether it's impeachment or the 25th Amendment.
I don't agree with him or anybody withdrawing from NATO. We would certainly have a lot less influence.
The White House pushed back. The president has made clear our allies must fulfill their commitments and share the burden for a strong defense. As the president has said, the United States' commitment to NATO is very strong, adding the president was simply trying to get NATO allies to spend more on their defense. The allies spent $35 billion more on defense during Trump's first year in office. 24 of 29 NATO members increased their defense budgets in 2018.
The president's threat to leave NATO coincides with reports he ordered his translator not to share what he said to Putin during his one-on-one meeting in Helsinki. The main beneficiary of the U.S. leaving NATO would, of course, be Russia. Brett.
Jen, meantime, the Defense Intelligence Agency, for the first time, releasing this report on China's military power. What struck you?
Well, the most alarming conclusion in the 100-plus page report is that China may be reaching a point of confidence after years of investment in modernizing its military that it could pose a real threat to Taiwan. Advances in hypersonic weapons, which could evade U.S. missile technology, and the launch of its first aircraft carrier this year all contribute to a growing confidence among Chinese generals, according to this report. Brett.
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. This is a Fox News alert. New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is the latest Democrat to join the presidential race. It's just a short time ago on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
I'm filing an exploratory committee for President of the United States tonight.
There you go. That interview airs tonight. Meantime, Broadway legend Carol Channing has died.
Hello, Harry, well, hello.
The performer, who of course rose to international fame in the musical Hello, Dolly, died of natural causes just after midnight. Channing began her work in that play in 1964. She continued touring until 1996, amassing more than 5,000 shows. Critic Tom Shales of the Washington Post once called Channing the ninth wonder of the world. Carol Channing was 97.
I believe it is vitally important that the special counsel be allowed to complete his investigation. If confirmed, I will not permit partisan politics, personal interests, or any other improper consideration to interfere with this or any other investigation. I don't believe Mr. Mueller would be involved in a witch hunt. I also believe it is very important that the public and Congress be informed of the results of the special counsel's work. The president wanted to know, he said, "Oh, you know Bob Mueller. How well do you know Bob Mueller?" And I told him how well I knew Bob Mueller and how, the Barrs and Muellers were good friends and would be good friends when this is all over.
Trump AG nominee Bill Barr up on Capitol Hill. Really, Democrats didn't lay a glove on him today. He pretty much handled it. Very compelling and effective testimony, according to experts who looked at this all day long. The White House weighing in, despite some of the things he said that were not what the president really talks about. Sarah Sanders saying he's a very honorable man doing what he believes, and the president respects that. The president thinks he will be a great attorney general. With that, let's bring in our panel, former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and president. I apologize for my voice. My mom just texted to say I need to have tea. I'm trying. I feel fine. But Mara, your thoughts on Barr's testimony today and really how he did?
I thought he did great. I thought he said a lot of things that should be reassuring to Democrats. No, he didn't say he'd recuse himself, but he said all those things you just played. Doesn't think Mueller's on a witch hunt. Thinks the report should be made public. He thinks the public in Congress should be informed. All those things are what Democrats wanted to hear. And I don't know, the White House is still saying they're happy and thrilled, thinks he'll be a great attorney general. But I don't know if those were the things that Donald Trump wanted to hear.
A lot of the focus, Ari, is on this memo that he wrote about obstruction of justice. And here's the AG nominee talking about that.
One theory in particular that appeared to be under consideration under a specific statute concerned me because I thought it would involve stretching the statute beyond what was intended. And my memo is very clear. That is the concern that was driving me. The impact, not the particular case, but its impact of a rule over time.
I think he answered it 25 times in that hearing.
Yeah, because people were looking for the reason they could derail his nomination, and they couldn't find it, so they kept looking for it. He gave a very good legal answer. I think there's a broader answer on that question, and that is people should be able to opine, give their opinions. But one of the beautiful things about our government is once you actually sit in those seats of responsibility, you recognize it's no longer opining. It's you act on the basis of precedent, law, and that is what's going to guide him. Look, I think he had a perfect day today in style and in substance. To me, the most important thing he said today, he talked about Bob Mueller's integrity, and then he talked about President Trump saying there is no collusion. And then he said, quote, the country needs a credible resolution of these issues. Amen. It is exactly what we need. We need to get beyond the Mueller report and to do so with credibility. He needs to become Attorney General without Mueller hanging underneath him. And I think the nation waits for that report, and credibility is the key.
Tom.
Yeah, he did say a lot of things. He said everything that Democrats wanted him to say. I think they should have been reassured by everything he said. I think on the Republican side, I thought people thought he was really good on the border, on immigration. But to your point, and the point that was made earlier, I think if you were a Trump supporter or a critic of the way of the Mueller investigation or the way this thing has been handled in the Department of Justice or the FBI, he said some things that I think people would recognize as red flags, that he and Mueller are good friends, had a high opinion of Rod Rosenstein, that this was not a witch hunt. And on down the line, that Sessions was right to recuse himself.
The one thing he did say to Lindsey Graham is that he found the Strzok page text horrifying, and he would look into it.
Correct, and he promised Lindsey Graham that he would look into abuses in the department, and that's something that I think Republicans, Trump supporters, want to see happen. And to the extent that he's able to do both of those things, then I think he will make a good attorney general. In terms of the other compelling thing is he did say he's 68. He doesn't need this job. He's doing it for the good of the country. He's doing it because he wants to bring this thing to a credible resolution. That is what the country needs. But again, he wasn't necessarily singing from the same sheet of music as a lot of Trump supporters.
You think he's only weeks away from his first tweet?
Could be. You never know when it's going to come. The nicknames will come.
Here is Senator Feinstein asking him about possibly firing Mueller.
If the president orders the Attorney General to halt a criminal investigation for personal reasons, would that be prohibited under your theory?
I think it would be a breach of the president's duties to faithfully execute the law. It would be an abuse of power. Under the regulations, Bob Mueller could only be terminated for good cause, and frankly, it's unimaginable to me that Bob would ever do anything that gave rise to good cause.
A number of Democrats tried to trip him up on a number of different things. There were three potential presidential contenders on that dais: Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Amy Klobuchar. All of them had moments, as they did in the Kavanaugh hearing. Is there one Democrat on that committee who is going to vote for Bill Barr?
Well, certainly not the ones you mentioned. They're all running for president, maybe. No, I think he's not going to get very many Democratic votes, if any.
In the meantime, the shutdown continues. The president tried to have Democrats at the White House today. Nobody showed up. Today, the Coast Guard missed a paycheck for the first time. Ari, where are we?
We're where a word that was an honorable word needs to be a word that's honorable once more, and that word is compromise. You cannot have an answer to a governmental problem where the Senate wants to pass some $6 billion in funding for a wall, the House wants to pass some $0 billion in funding for a wall, and the answer not be around 3. It is eternally the answer in this town for the House and the Senate to compromise. And when one party says the answer is 0, 0, 0, and their only answer is 0, we have a breakdown. I'm certain the Senate will go below 6. I'm not certain the House will ever go above 0.
Well,
that is the whole. That's the problem with compromise. If you're not going to meet the other body halfway, the problem is you, and the problem is the House because they will not compromise.
Hey, but they were at 1.3.
They were at 1.3. They were at 1.3. This whole thing has just mind-boggled me because nobody is looking for the win-win solution where both sides can get what they want. And guess what? Both sides do want border security. They define it differently. That's how compromises are made.
As Tom mentioned, Bill Barr said, I feel it's critical for border security to have a barrier at the border. And he made that clear today.
People are in favor of border security. People also don't want the government shut down. Polling right now shows that people are holding Trump responsible. But I think Democrats are starting to run the risk of intransigence, not even showing up to bargain at all, and even arrogance, being on junkets in Puerto Rico while the government is shut down. That's not a good look for Democrats, and that may end up hurting them in the long run if this continues to go on. Trump still has a national emergency in his back pocket. He may use it if it gets to the point where he has no other options because he just can't capitulate.
We will see. Next up, the Brexit crisis in Great Britain, what it may mean for the U.S. and possibly for you.